All right. Well, it is 11:05. We will get started. Thank you all so much for joining us, especially on a Friday morning when it's super cold and chilly. I'm really thrilled that there's so many people out there who are as fascinated and as passionate about road stream crossings and infrastructure and ecology as I am. My name is Megan Lung. I'm a project manager here at Save the Sound. I'm joined by my colleague Amanda Devine, also with Save the Sound. And on this project, we have a bunch of awesome partners, but joining us today are Christian Gass and Emily Mercurio from CivicMapper. They were our GIS consultants, and they actually were the ones to take all of our data, all of our crossings, and do all the back and forth, and actually build this using ArcGIS Experience Builder, if that's right. If it's not right, Emily or Christian will correct me. So please feel free to keep commenting in the chat as you have questions. Put them in probably the Q&A section would be the best spot since we had 110 people register. We're just under 54, so it might just be hard for Amanda and I to track all that. But if we don't answer your question today, or if you like a follow-up, we will share all of our contact information at the end, so we can follow up on more specific questions if needed. I will go ahead and share my screen. Just give me one moment. So today we're here to finally, at long last, give a public debut of our regional road stream crossing tool for the Long Island Sound, aka our crossing prioritization tool. Like I mentioned, Amanda and I work for Save the Sound. We are a regional nonprofit environmental organization, and we are dedicated to fighting climate change, saving endangered lands, protecting the sound, its rivers, and work with nature to restore ecosystem services. We work mostly in the states of Connecticut and New York, but we do partner with other organizations that extend all the way up into the headwaters of the watershed. Specifically, I have the pleasure of working on our ecological restoration team. So I really like that on the restoration team, I get to work on projects from nose to tail. So all the way from coming up with an idea and visiting a site with partners to applying for the funding to designing things, coming up with tools like the one that we're going to demonstrate, all the way to an on-the-ground construction project that leads to something that is better for the ecosystem and better for our human communities. So before we really get into it, I'm going to give a little bit of background, talk a little bit about the project, and then we'll get into the actual tool. But really what we're here about today is all about rivers, people, and infrastructure. Rivers are long linear ecosystems and they provide an absolute ton of services. They're tremendous sources of biodiversity, of enjoyment, of centers of cultural inspiration. Can provide power for us, drinking water, recreation, irrigation. They provide so many services for how our natural environment functions. They are the Earth's circulatory system. However, it is really, really easy for human infrastructure to disconnect these rivers, and when we disconnect rivers, we have the potential to lose some of these benefits. Both the dam you saw downstream with that very handsome buck that I'm convinced is the same buck that I've been seeing for 3 years. This is on the Blind Brook. This is in Westchester County in the city of Rye. And this little dam is owned by the nearby school district, and it's the first barrier that organisms encounter as they're migrating from the Long Island Sound up into the freshwater tributaries. And even something like this can lead to a disruption of those ecosystem services that we talk about. Definitely for larger scale dams, but we're learning more and more about these medium and low scale dams. We can see when there's a disruption of flow, we can see a drop in dissolved oxygen, an increase in water temperatures, and changes in how sediment is transported, how nutrients are transported, and the overall habitat. And every time we have a piece of human infrastructure, in this case focusing on dams and road stream crossings, our culverts and bridges, there's an opportunity for disconnection. Disconnect. Whoa, sorry about that. It's Friday, it's the end of the week, it's cold. Disconnection can impact humans as well. So we talk about all those things like, there's flooding implications, there's erosion implications. Actually, downstream of this site, the neighboring landowner has planted bamboo in their streamside bank. And great chunks of that, every time I visit the site, are kind of just scouring away and flopping into the stream. And we can also have degrading water quality with that. And these issues can be not only expensive, but also extensive. These are issues that they're easy to start. Correcting them sometimes takes a bit of work and multiple solutions. So for this project, it really involves Westchester County, Nassau County, and Suffolk County in New York. But for my part and Save the Sounds part, we started with using Westchester County as a case study. For those of you who don't know, Westchester County is the county that is immediately above New York City. What you're seeing in green on this side, this is the watershed area of the Long Island Sound. Over here is the Hudson, where I previously came from. And Westchester County is home to over 1 million people. It has 80 miles of major tributary to the Long Island Sound and almost 2,000 miles of roadway. And one thing I have learned here, so we have same image, Westchester County. This is the satellite imagery. You see all the development. This is a shot from a tropical storm we had. I think this is either Ida or Henri from a couple years ago. And each one of these closures, you may notice if you're familiar with the area, these are on the major parkways that run through the county and connect us all. And what I've learned is that for every major river that runs through Westchester County, there is a parkway associated with it. So we have the Hutchinson River Parkway, the Sprain Brook, the Sprain Parkway, the Bronx River, the Sawmill. So we're really drawn to these places, but as a result, you can see like kind of how easy it is for not only rivers to get disconnected, but for changes to happen on the floodplain and on the watershed itself. And this is pretty typical of what we can see, especially on some of these major tributaries. This is the Beaver Swamp Brook in Westchester County, about 10 minutes from our office here in Larchmont. And what we can see is that the stream has been totally disconnected from its floodplain with these stone walls. So one thing that, we notice out in the field, I'm an ecologist, I'm not an engineer, but when I see sites like this, I notice that water really, really speeds up. I don't see a lot of habitat diversity down here because any kind of sediment is being scoured away by this fast-moving water. And I mention that because our urban streams, I don't have to make the case to you all, hopefully, but our urban streams are deserving of restoration. A lot of times when I first put this parts of this presentation together, I was presenting in Seattle at a fisheries conference, and I was looking at people who were working on the Klamath Dam removals and the Elwha, and I was like, I'm here for the Bronx River. I'm here fighting for like a half mile of reconnection. And just because our areas they look different from what you might see in more undeveloped watersheds or more wild rivers, whatever that might mean to you, that doesn't mean that there isn't potential there, that there wasn't a vast bounty, that can't still be the case today. So I've got a couple pictures. Like I mentioned, I came from the Hudson program before I joined Save the Sound. So these two images are of the Sawmill River in Yonkers. This was actually daylighted. So this was all buried and this was uncovered with Fish and Wildlife funding with partners from Groundwork Hudson Valley and the DEC. So you can see they've kept a nod to that industrial past with a water mill, uncovered the floodplain, made this accessible to the community. This is the lower part where the sawmill joins the Hudson River, where you can actually walk. And there are actually murals both in the pavement and like this one to the American eel, which is North America's only catadromous fish and one of my favorite species that I get to work on the behalf of. Similar here, we have my colleague John Van Wert in Connecticut. And over here in the impoundment of a dam on the Bronx River, we have birds. I have never birded as much as when I started like looking at these urban river systems. So if there's one thing you take from this presentation, aside from, wow, that's a really cool tool, I can't wait to use it to make some change. I want you to think about images like this. Think about these creatures. Think about the human connection. And just really, really, every time someone pushes back and says, oh, it's only a half mile of habitat, it's not worth it. It definitely is worth it. And think about like what we could accomplish together. And I mention that because things are really dire, especially for our migratory fishes that are, living in the ocean, coming back into freshwater to spawn, going backward, going back to do it all over again. This is a slide I borrowed from our soundkeepers, Allison and Bill, just showing the commercial landings of American shad and river herring. And you see over here on the 1950s, just looking at the sheer amount. This is in millions of pounds here for shad, millions of pounds here for river herring. And you can really see just how things have really petered off, really crashed. So there is still potential for us to do something altogether. And the way that I am doing my part for the shad and the herring and the eels is looking for ways to open up habitat to restore that access for them. That brings us to our main project and topic of the day, the Westchester Stream Barrier Inventory Project. This project was made possible with support from the Long Island Sound Futures Fund with the Long Island Sound Partnership, the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, and importantly, use seed funding from the Alexander Center for Ecological Action. And also, for those of you who are members of Save the Sound, your membership, your donations, this helps fund projects like this one, getting the time to apply for the larger funding sources and go forward with it. So thank you to everyone who has donated. Thank you if you've thought about donating. Thank you if you work for one of our funding agencies. Especially for my friends at the DEC, we got a separate grant to work on a sister project like this on the Blind Brook, that little dam that I showed earlier in those videos. Those matching funds were provided from a separate grant that we received from DEC around the same time. Now to the meat and potatoes of why you're all here on a Friday morning. This project has a lot of deliverables. If anybody feels very, very passionately about quality assurance project plans, I have a whopper 75-page QUAP that hopefully if you want to replicate this in your watershed, you are more than welcome to use that QUAP as a resource. We use fieldwork to identify and assess over 331 road stream crossings and low-head dams that were absent from the New York State inventory of dams. We also did a risk of failure analysis and ranking that was based off of secondary data, so things like resilient New York flood studies or FEMA flood insurance maps, and using field indicators where we might have issues of, we've got high erosive like water forces coming through. What we're all here for today, this regional prioritization tool using ArcGIS Online. That was another key deliverable of this that is now done. And with our partners at Westchester County, we're also conducting a dam removal reconnaissance study on one structure. We've been doing that on a structure in the Bronx River, and that has involved not only water quality monitoring for a year with the assistance of our colleagues in the water protection team at Save the Sound, but also sediment quality testing and a sediment quantity analysis based off of a high-grade survey that we conducted. So if you're interested in that one, maybe that's a separate webinar and presentation. On the off chance, one of my siblings or a family member is watching this because they still have no idea what I do, this is how I explain it. Like I mentioned, I'm from the state of Michigan, and in the state of Michigan, there we have two terms for Michiganders. If you are from the Upper Peninsula, you live north of the Mackinac Bridge, you're a Youper. If you are like me and you grew up south of the Mackinac Bridge, you're called a troll. So I tell my family and friends that I am a professional troll because I skulk around underneath roads and bridges, and I'm looking at the river. So a road stream crossing is anywhere where a road and a stream meet. And in New York State, although friends at DOT, please correct me if the definition has changed or if I'm oversimplifying it. In New York State, a crossing is less than 20 feet in width. That's a culvert. You get above 20 feet in width, that's a bridge. Even if it might look like a culvert, it's classified as a bridge. And each one of these crossings can have multiple structures. So just because you see a crossing, it doesn't mean that there's just one thing there. Everybody has to have a large map slide that has a lot of data, but you probably can't read from this scale. What you're seeing here, so again, in this light green over here, this is the Long Island Sound. This stuff over here, that's the Hudson River. I think very fondly of it, but we're not including those road stream crossings at this time. And what you're seeing here with colorful squares and colorful circles and more colorful circles are tidal road stream crossings, non-tidal road stream crossings, and dams that are in the New York State inventory. And this is basically like when we talk about streams being long and linear and like being vulnerable to being chopped up, this is the scale. So these light green small circles, these guys aren't the problems. That's not what we're worried about. We're really looking and trying to focus in on these big red circles and squares. So these are structures where, from a protocol that we use with our to conduct and collect fieldwork, these are the sites where we think that there is going to be an ecological disconnection. And what tends to happen when we do have that ecological disconnection, it tends to be associated with some kind of a flooding or erosion issue. So when we're talking about potential projects, not only are we looking for sites that would be beneficial to creatures, but also beneficial to people and resiliency. Each one of those dots involved fieldwork. I never miss an opportunity to brag about my technicians, Nicholas and Sarah. In 2024, they did an absolutely Herculean task of assessing what ended up being 400 crossings between New York and Connecticut. They did this in cold weather. They did this in hot weather. One time, to reach some crossings on the Bronx River, they had to walk, I think, like a mile and a half in their waders carrying gear. So they were absolutely incredible. So really, for everybody who gets the opportunity to hire and mentor field technicians, really treat like treat them well because they are absolutely worth their weight in gold. And I'm really grateful for their contribution to this project. The protocol that Nicholas and Sarah and myself were using to assess and inventory these crossings comes from the North Atlantic Aquatic Connectivity Collaborative, or NAC, which is a mouthful. So now I'm just going to call it NAC now that we've said that. And NAC is a partnership of 13 states in the North Atlantic region, all the way from Maine to West Virginia. Everybody is assessing crossings in the same way, so we can compare sites across the region, apples to apples. It's made up of four protocols. We're going to be talking about the OG NAC, the non-tidal. They came out also with a tidal assessment that is specifically for crossings that are tidally influenced, either with saltwater or freshwater. And then we won't talk about it today, but in the future, there is also a risk of failure assessment, and there is a terrestrial connectivity assessment. So you can assess one crossing potentially in four different ways and get very different information. And this is all intended to be done by volunteers at a volunteer level, and these are rapid one-day assessments. So when we get later into the slide, when we're looking at the tool and you notice that you might be missing a crossing, I don't doubt that we're missing crossings, but we can talk about how to get back out there and inventory those. NAC has a publicly facing database. There's no need to log in. You can go and search, and I'll show you how to do that later when we demo the tool. But when you do that, you'll get a whole range of information, including when the data was QAQC'd, looking at pictures of the actual structure, dimensions and descriptions, including how to access it, what its ranking is. So in this case, we were looking at an insignificant barrier, how many structures we're dealing with, and then same thing for here. All right. So now the crossing prioritization tool, we're there at last. What we wanted to do after collecting all of this data, because we've been collecting data in Westchester County, Seatuck has been working in Nassau and Suffolk County. The Nature Conservancy has been working in Suffolk County to assess crossings since 2017. We wanted to put all this together, and TNC had also developed a method to try to prioritize crossings, not as a for sure work on this site, but as a way to collect a lot of information. In some cases, municipalities may be responsible for hundreds of crossings. It's a lot of information to go through. And we wanted to do our part and look for ways where we can improve things for people, but also the ecology. So in this case, we took TNC's ranking and methodology, and we applied this to all of our crossings in Westchester, Nassau, and Suffolk. So there are slight differences with the scoring protocol, but they're meant to help us look at things approximately the same thing. Just as NAC helps us look at road stream crossings regionally, this tool is meant to help us look at crossings regionally, and it's broken up into a composite score that has four categories. We're looking at things from an ecological perspective, a resilience one, transportation, and infrastructure. And what we really hope is that this will be a resource for partners. So to be able to go through a lot of information and try to match partners up with sources of funding, where if there is an opportunity in DEC's water quality improvement program to look at barrier culverts, if you can look at our map and quickly suss out the 5 crossings in your municipality that may be the best applicants for that and save time, that's a win for us. That's a good use of the tool. This is a screenshot of what the tool looks like, and we're going to get into it. So you can see we have a big clustering of sites in Westchester County. Although I should say this is a regional tool, but all of Suffolk County and all of Nassau County were assessed where the Seatuck and TNC teams could get to them. So our name is a little bit misleading because you get a bit of extra data there. And you can see everything is color coded based off of currently this total prioritization score. So again, we really want to draw your eyes towards those reds and yellows for sites that might be in most need of assistance or most need of maintenance or keeping an eye on. This is Westchester County. So this is downstream actually of that dam that I talked about. That dam is actually right here where we were earlier. And this also gives us the opportunity to look at things cumulatively, but also break it down into these categorical scores. So if you're not really interested in like, Megan, like, I have money for resilience. I don't have money for ecology. You can sort out and look at it in a different way. So our cumulative, you can click on this for more information. You can see how these break down. So this is the crossing at Playland Parkway on the Blind Brook. And this scores pretty decently. It's an ecological concern, it's a resiliency concern. Um, and it also scores like for transportation being like a main road. And then also a little bit about condition, but infrastructure condition is something that we intend to return to for municipalities because crossings change, priorities change. And frankly, we were out there assessing, it happened during the second half of the busiest time of year for highway supervisors and DPW crews, which is maintenance and paving season. So if we didn't hear from somebody, I didn't take offense. There we go. So the same area, but now we've gone from the total prioritization score to the categorical score. Whoops. Resilience. All of a sudden, this lines up pretty heavily in red. And Westchester County actually recently got some funding to address these two particular crossings. And I bet it's from a resiliency point of view. Transportation, not too bad. Infrastructure, also not too bad. So things are scored a little bit differently just because we do have tidal crossings, we have non-tidal crossings. And for the most part, the biggest differences are going to be in the ecological category, the resilience, and a little bit of the infrastructure. So for tidal crossings, in particular with TNC's original protocol, we were really looking at salt marsh complexes and potential for that, and actually looking at tidal restriction and if the vegetation was significantly different upstream and downstream of a crossing. Resiliency, looking at sea level rise, risk of storm surge, heavy rainfall, flood risk within the watershed. That's something that both of the categories are going to share. And then also risk of high water with a lack of clearance in those tidal crossings. Same thing with non-tidal. Things are just a little bit different. So looking at downstream barriers, length of what we can reconnect. Same thing, because we still have risk of flooding from the watershed, so heavy rainfall risk, partner priority, and then transportation is the same for both of them. All right. So there are going to be slight variations in the data when you really start to dig into them. These were collected in three different kind of year time periods and with different funding sources. So they may not line up exactly apples to apples, but we're hoping we've got like Granny Smiths and Snapdragons. So you have varieties of apples to compare. I must really be craving a snack because I keep mentioning apples. So Suffolk County came first, starting in 2017. Nassau County from Seatuck in 2022, and Westchester County with us here at Save the Sound in 2024. And I just wanted to flag here again, partner priority, like we didn't take offense if we didn't get to hear from municipalities before we started, because you all are really busy. This is like some of the busiest times of year for folks. But connecting with partners and getting their priorities can really influence the score. That's that infrastructure score category. So what we're doing now is demonstration webinars like this. CivicMapper has migrated the tool over to Save the Sound's ArcGIS Online account. So everybody can use this. It's free. We're going to go right to the link. You don't even need me. You could probably leave the webinar at this point if you really wanted to go explore. But I did want to mention that the tool uses about 700 credits a year. So this isn't really it's not a huge lift for us. Like as I've learned from Emily, like we have a lot of credits that we haven't been utilizing. So we're happy to have this be a resource for everybody to use. Currently, the tool is going to be static for a while. We are not going to have any additions to the tool for now, but we are exploring the expansion of the school into Connecticut potentially, and then also with the plethora of crossings that we may have missed. For example, for Westchester County, we focused on the biggest rivers first with those 331 crossings. From what the NAC database estimates from smaller streams, unnamed streams that are little but nonetheless still important in the grand scheme of things. There may be another 600 crossings in Westchester County alone that we should be including at some point in the future. If we have missed a crossing, and that's not an if, we totally have missed crossings. Crossings can be very cryptic and sneaky. If you thought looking for Bigfoot was hard, I challenge you to find a 2 foot diameter culvert on an unnamed stream during like high vegetation season. And sometimes field conditions can vary. So we're not doing this like we're not formally closing any roads. We're accessing these with right of way and doing so safely. So we're perpetually missing crossings. If there is a crossing that you really care about, that you really think like should like needs to be in this tool immediately, email me and let's talk about it and we can talk about how to get that in there. I wanted to give one last big thanks to our partners, CivicMapper, Seatuck, the Nature Conservancy, and Westchester County. One more thanks to our project funders because we would not get to do this if we didn't have funding. Thank you so much for your patience. Thanks for joining. I'm going to stop sharing for now and we are going to go to the tool for demonstration and question. All right. And I guess if there are questions now that you have that before we get to the tool, by all means, please put them in the Q&A. Oh, thanks, Christian. I see Christian's coming off. So I will get our tool all shared up. And Christian and Emily built the tool, so I am just like a geek getting to use it. So Christian or Emily, if anywhere you'd like to step in or talk about things, I'm more than happy to help facilitate that. All right. Are you all seeing a browser window from me?
Yes.
Fantastic. So when you click on the tool, and we can drop the link in the chat, it's also we updated it this morning on the registration page. But this is where you land. So here is once it loads, there we go. Here's the tool itself. You hit that home button, you zoom out to our full extent. And over here on the side under the About column, this is where you can find out a little bit of detail about the project, why we're doing this, how the scoring is broken down. And if you click on this link, it'll take you to a page where you can download the full scoring details. So like those slight differences between the 3 different counties. This is how you can get um, the full behind the scenes look at how those decisions were made and how we did these things. So I'll go back to the tool for now. Go to map. And Amanda, I guess if folks are curious about specific areas or have specific questions that we can get through now, we can also feel free to hop in at any time.
I do see one question, which I can read. Someone asked, do you have a list of crossings by latitude, longitude, or by municipality?
That is an excellent question, and I think we can demonstrate some of that functionality in the tool. I will say that one thing we are going to be working on is currently from this, you cannot download data directly from here, but we do have the ability to filter. So if you want the raw data for a given municipality behind each one of these dots, email me and I can get that over to you. All right. So we can zoom in. You can see that we have layers that as you zoom in, they'll become apparent so we don't get overwhelmed all at once. Do, 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 do. There we go. We're just going to pick on Rye for a little bit because I work in Rye a lot and I really like the Blind Brook. Okay. So you can see as you zoom in, more features going to become available, such as the labels, the flow lines, including what direction, which I sometimes always struggle with depending on where I'm looking. So I really appreciate that set being added. And there is a way to filter these crossings. So someone asked earlier about, location or XY coordinates. So you can select by municipality. And I think, here we go. So in this case, let's just show by Rye. Huh. Christian, is there a way to unclick everybody that I'm not thinking of?
Yep, there's that checkbox button at the bottom. Should do it for you. And the unchecked to the left.
Unchecked. Okay, perfect. I see. So I probably messed that up by clicking ahead of
Yep.
everything.
So, yep. And then the
Okay.
toggle at the top of the municipality filter will actually turn it on. So,
Oh, gotcha.
yep,
All right. So there we go. Almost there, everybody. Okay, so we'll turn that on. So we turn down just for Rye. And if we zoom back out,
yep. And
there we go. It is also possible, probably due to error in the field. Like if you notice something that's also like, that's in the wrong area, Megan, like you can email me too. That's okay. Yeah. So
so
that's one example.
the
Yep.
filtering is additive. So if you were to pick a municipality in a specific estuary, it's going to use both of those conditions. Or road jurisdiction. There's also filtering by score. So if you're interested in looking at just showing crossings that need the most attention, um, or drilling into a specific benefit category and looking at crossings by by who needs the most attention, um, that's available as well. And those are also additive too. So I think one thing, Megan, I took me a long time when we worked on this to sort of wrap my head around was that a higher score is a higher total benefit, and what that means is that the benefit in addressing the issues with it is higher. Um, that's just kind of as a reminder. So yeah, there's more work to be done, but more potential benefit in addressing them.
Yeah. So this is like what Christian was demonstrating with the, so say we want to do at least a total benefit of 12, but our funding is ecologically based. So we want at least a score of 3 out of 5. And you'll see that some sites turn off with that. Go up that to 4, more sites turn off. Neat. And then Christian, I just turn them off to get everybody back. Yep.
Yep.
Fantastic.
And then the map layers mentioned, Megan, you mentioned the flow lines. That's from the National Hydrography data set. And you get more and more detail the closer you zoom in, watershed boundaries, the flow lines, and other things.
Yep.
But if you're finding the maps too cluttered, you can turn those things off as well. That service is hosted not by not not on this ArcGIS Online, but it's a federal data set. So if I guess if there are questions about that or anything, sort of we can direct you to those resources. Um, the other aspect is that you kind of showed this when you do click on individual points um, or crossings, there is the crossing detail tab on the left side of the screen, and that largely reflects what you see in the pop-up. Just gives you a little more screen real estate to look at it. And that will change based on whether you're looking at the total prioritization score or individual category scores. It'll just have kind of less. This will show final scoring as well as ecological transportation and so on. There's also a link at the bottom of these for a site report. That actually opens up a separate Experience Builder app, and it's just a simplified view of the scoring for that site with similar information, but focuses on it, gives you a little map. So this is good if you need to present a screenshot or anything on a specific site for reporting.
Yeah. And this was something I think that TNC had initially done that we were really interested in carrying over.
Yeah, and we talked about doing static PDF generation, and we kind of landed on something that was a little more dynamic to support any updates to the field or field work or scoring on these sites. So
Yeah.
this will all, it's live and is connected to the data that's hosted on ArcGIS Online.
Sorry, I have to keep moving
Yep.
the speaker bubble with this unwieldy Zoom share bar beast. One thing I did also want to demonstrate, let me find a good one for it. Pick on, we'll pick on the South Shore really quickly. There we go. So if you're curious about pictures, because this, we weren't able to add a direct link to the NAC database, because for those of you who might really, really, really be into culverts in the region, the NAC database is going to be, NAC is going to be combined with SARP, the Southeast Aquatic Resource Partnership. And Kat and her team are going to develop a national aquatic connectivity collaborative. So what we've done here in the Northeast, what they're doing in the Southeast, that's going to be going national. So we're going to have a way soon to look at crossings across the country. But for now, if you take this NAC survey ID, you can actually go right to the NAC data center. You're just going to need, if it's a tidal or non-tidal crossing, but you take this survey ID, you go to search crossings. I'm logged in right now, but you don't have to be. You can still see everything. You can see that there are 85,000 crossings assessed within the database, which is, I will never not be impressed by. But you can just drop that survey ID here. There's our result. And this is how, this may have been a bad one to pick because sometimes I make fun of us and how we take pictures when we're in the field because conditions are so different. But this is how you would access those pictures. And something that we started doing first with the Hudson at the DEC at the Hudson River Estuary Program, and also in other areas like the Housatonic Valley Association, we actually have started taking pictures of the road surface of a lot of structures that are being assessed after 2020. So we found that through feedback with highway supervisors, a lot of their maintenance schedule can be driven by like if there is an issue with the surface of the road. And that's another good indicator of like what's going on beneath. But this is how you can get to more detailed information and like structure shape on the NAC side of things. Uh, I can't see them yet. I'm seeing some more questions in the chat, or are there recommendations of like crossings we should check out, Amanda?
Yes, there's one question about wondering what email address people should use for adding missing culverts.
Oh, gotcha. I might regret this. We can go ahead and provide my email address for now, but I think what we may do is we may try to create a generic save the sound, a generic email so I don't get absolutely inundated. But I would say for now, if there are crossings that you're really interested in, feel free to email me and I can connect you. Like if you're in Long Island, I'll probably connect you with Chris or Katie or Enrico at Seatuck. Um, my caveat with these structures that I don't think we mentioned is that all of these have some kind of a natural water ecological connection. So if a stream was formerly there and it was buried and piped underground, we still would want to assess that structure as much as possible. But if it is a sewer outfall or something where it's just diverting just pure stormwater without a natural connection, that's something that we would not include in the data mapper.
I also think there's just one quick comment from Jillian. She said it will eventually be National Aquatic Connectivity Collaborative, NACC, pronounced the same way.
Yep. That's the joy of all these like kind of culvert assessment protocols that, have been active and, for some time, so in some places decades. The North Atlantic, our group, the current double ANAC, we have probably the best training protocol and like the widest network of volunteers and reaching out to watershed groups, state agencies, and local municipalities. So I think it's really fitting that, we get to keep the name on a pronunciation scale. Awesome. Are there any more areas or requests at places we should look at or other functionality of the tool people want to see? And I should also mention if you want some time to play around with this, or if you want a one-on-one presentation, or you want us at Save the Sound to come visit your municipality and talk about your data, we're also more than happy to do that as well. All you have to do is email me. Hey, I will stop sharing for now. I'll let people have another couple minutes, I think, to answer questions. I'm more than happy to share again. I will put my email address that if there are missing crossings, or if you want to talk about your municipality's data one-on-one, that is my email address for now. We'll use that. Christian, is there anything big about the tool that I missed?
I think that you mentioned data download capability coming. There is the data tab on it, which will reflect however you filter the data. It'll just show those records. But also, if I mean, this is sort of up to Save the Sound, but this is hosted in ArcGIS Online, and there's sharing capabilities through that platform. So if you're looking to build your own maps, or on subsets of this data, um, there are ways to provide that information to your own GIS, if that is necessary. So I think the tool definitely gives you a good way to drill down and get to it. But it's not locked down behind anything. It's open, documented data access standards and formats. So it can be used outside of the tool.
Gotcha. And ArcGIS Online is so cool. There's so much to learn about it. We actually brought Emily out with some additional funds that we had to give us kind of a jump start for our organization. So, and there's just so much to learn, and there's a lot available like for free if you already have an Esri membership, as we learned. One question that I got in the Q&A is there a timeline on when the expansion to Connecticut might be, or when we want to start adding new data to the tool? I'll say that's going to be funding dependent. This was not, the overall project was very, very large, but building the actual app, and like our subcontract with CivicMapper was, I believe, about 40,000. That's between Save the Sound and Seatuck. So I think this has been like a tremendous bang for buck, but I would say funding dependent. We do have plans to look at Connecticut, and that for future projects, we will be looking to add for the ability to add more New York data as the projects make sense. Okay. Um, and then following up with that from Christine, Christine asked, do we have any plans to map existing road stream crossing inventories on the tool? We have a ton of inventories in the Naugatuck Valley region in Connecticut that are assessed but not mapped on the tool. Hmm. That would depend if they are within the NAC inventory. That makes it a lot easier for us. One thing that will take a lot of coordinating, and we've already been having conversations with other partners like TNC in Connecticut and HVA, is how to address the resiliency category. So in the tool, resiliency is different for each category. Suffolk County, I believe, used a version possibly of the Cornell capacity model that the folks at Cornell WRI have come up with. Seatuck is in the process of evaluating if they want to do that approach. Save the Sound initially for Westchester County, we wanted to do something similar, but it wasn't going to be timely enough in the timeline we have for this project. So we ended up using field indicators and combining that with existing FEMA data and the Resilient New York studies that parts of New York State are getting. So I would say if there's NAC data, that solves a big chunk of things. And the question to think about for expansion is how would you want to address that resiliency category? Yep. And And then Jillian, who's with Housatonic Valley Association, mentions that those road stream crossing management plans that HVA develops, if you're in the Hudson, even though you're not in this tool, there are road stream management plans for a lot of municipalities in the Hudson River Estuary watershed. They do include condition and a flood risk analysis, but Jillian says that she's available to talk offline or connect afterwards. And then quickly, not quickly, but Max asks if the funds for addressing crossings are tied to a particular benefits category, and how I mentioned that funds are ecological, not resilience. What if a crossing has the same score for many categories? I would say that there is a way to be creative in addressing crossings. We at Save the Sound truly believe that a crossing that is ecologically sound, that is passable for all creatures at all times, at all life stages, those tend to be the crossings that are also going to be resilient towards climate change. One thing that we noticed a lot, even though we had a lot of bridges in Westchester County, for example, is that the streams are very channelized and they're very confined. That is the NAC protocol use kind of measures connectivity. It's not species specific, but from what you can see with like habitat, when you walk in some of these streams, you'll notice it doesn't have a lot of diversity because a lot of that water is being compressed and it's shooting forward, and as a result of that, those streams tend to be disconnected from their floodplain. So I would say, depending on the source and the scores and the information we have available in the tool, you can use that to build your argument in terms of what is going to be the best, depending on the funding source, which aspect should you appeal to in the spirit of whatever the funding source is, if that helps. And I'm happy to talk offline about that, Max.
We also
Thanks.
have another question in the Q&A section. Angela from DEC asked, if a crossing is replaced or removed, should we reach out to you? I know of one or two in the works off the top of my head.
Angela, that is a great question. I would say definitely if it's in the Long Island Sound watershed, you can reach out to me. I saw that Jim Katz from the Estuary program is also there. So if it's in the Hudson, I'd reach out to Jim. I would say at a minimum, even if we can't update the mapper as often as like the NAC database can get updated, I'd say at a minimum, if we can update and do a new NAC assessment, that I think might be the first step. But that's a really good long-term question with long-term funding implications. That's a real good one, Angela. Okay. If there are any other questions, it's 11:58. You all made it through me talking at you a bunch. You made it through 3 technical disruptions, and it's a Friday morning. I don't want to stand between anyone at lunch. I'm happy to hang on for a couple minutes if folks have some more questions they want to put in the chat. Other than that, thank you all so much for your attention, for your focus, for caring about a very, very niche topic. This was incredible. We had over 60 people join on a Friday morning to talk about culverts. I'm still so jazzed about that. Um, yeah. And again, thank you so much. We can't do projects like this. We can't do presentations like this if we didn't have an audience who was curious and wanting to figure out how they can get involved. So thank you all for your effort, and I hope to collaborate with you all soon.